The SHU Kitchen, the dark side of eating in solitary at Pelican Bay. The tray that shouldn't exist. The metal food slot slammed open with a loud clang. Inside the SHU at Pelican Bay, inmate Marcus Rivera froze. He stared at the tray the officer just pushed through, a tray that made no sense. It wasn't the usual mush. It wasn't the cold oatmeal brick. It wasn't the mystery loaf that tasted like wet cardboard. Straight was burning hot, fresh, and dripping with thick red sauce. Marcus pressed his ear to the steel door. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then he whispered to himself. They don't cook meals like this in the SHU, unless something went wrong. He lifted the tray. Steam rolled up like fog in the night. And beneath the sauce, he saw it. A torn piece of rubber glove melted into the food. His heart dropped. The SHU was already a place where men lost their minds. But this meant someone in the kitchen was either playing games or trying to send a message. Marcus stared at the tray again, and this time he noticed something else. Something scratched into the bottom of the metal pan. "Don't eat tonight." The lights flickered. A loud scream echoed down the tier. Marcus stepped back from the door. Something was happening inside the SHU kitchen, and whatever it was leaking into the food. And this was only the beginning. The tray line. The SHU kitchen at Pelican Bay wasn't a real kitchen. It was a tiny concrete room hidden behind heavy steel doors. No windows. No sunlight. Just cold walls, a beat-up sink, and a giant metal machine that mixed everything together. Inmates didn't cook the food here, officers did. And they did it fast. Every meal was the same process. Push ingredients into the industrial mixer. Add water until it looked like thick paste. Pour it into metal trays. Slide it into heated carts. Roll it straight to solitary. Some days the food was too salty. Some days it was half frozen. Some days it tasted like bleach. But nobody complained. In the SHU, complaining only made your next tray worse. Marcus knew this. Everyone in the SHU knew this. He had been in solitary for 11 months, 23 hours a day alone, 1 hour in a barren concrete yard. Food was the only thing that broke the silence. But lately, the trays had been different. One morning, the oatmeal had tiny black flakes floating in it. Another time, the beans smelled like gasoline. And 2 weeks ago, someone found a twist tie baked into their cornbread. But today was the worst. The melted glove. The scratched message. The warning. Marcus sat on his bunk, staring at the tray. He didn't want to believe the kitchen was doing this on purpose. But he also knew Pelican Bay's SHU had dark stories. Stories about officers rushing, cutting corners, treating the kitchen like a punishment tool. He sniffed the food again. Something wasn't right. Then the screams came back, louder this time. Someone farther down the tier shouted, "Yo, did you get a tray too?" Another voice yelled back, "They tryna kill us in here." Marcus felt his chest tighten. He pushed the tray under the bunk. Outside his door, the officer's keys jingled. Boots walked closer, and stopped right in front of his cell. The officer tapped the small slot with a metal baton. Click, click. Then, in a low voice he said, "Eat what you got. You don't get anything else tonight." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't move. He just listened as the officer walked away, leaving behind the heavy smell of bad food and a warning he couldn't ignore. Because in Pelican Bay's SHU, the kitchen wasn't just a kitchen. It was a system, a silent weapon, a place where mistakes, or messages, were hidden in every tray. And tonight, Marcus felt like he had been chosen for something he didn't understand yet. But he was about to. Very soon. The smell from the ducts. Marcus barely slept. Every few minutes, he'd hear something, a distant cough, a tray sliding, or the metal door vibrating as someone kicked it in frustration. But around 3 a.m., something new floated through the vents, something sharp, something chemical. A smell. Not bleach. Not soap. Not the usual disinfectant they used every night. This one smelled like burnt plastic mixed with sour milk. Marcus sat up instantly. He sniffed again. What is that? It wasn't coming from the hallway. It wasn't coming from the toilet. It wasn't coming from under the door. It was coming from inside the air vent, the same vent that carried heat from the SHU kitchen. He pressed his ear against the metal grill. At first, only silence. Then a faint clatter. Then a second sound heavier, like someone dropped a tool. And then a voice. "Hurry up." Another voice replied. "It's melting, pull it out." Marcus froze. They were cooking something in the kitchen after hours. Something that wasn't supposed to be made. Something that smelled wrong. He stepped back from the vent, heart thudding. Whatever they were doing down there, it wasn't regular food prep. It wasn't dinner. It wasn't breakfast. This was something else. And then beep, beep, beep. A small alarm echoed through the vent system. Someone shut it off fast. Too fast. The smell got stronger. Marcus covered his mouth with his shirt, breathing through the fabric. He remembered the melted glove. The message etched into the tray. "Don't eat tonight." Now it made sense. Something toxic, or at least unsafe, was happening. He paced in the tiny cell, back and forth, 8 steps one way, 8 steps back. Then the tear erupted. Metal doors slammed. Men began yelling. "Yo, what's that smell? We breathin' poison in here. Turn the damn vents off." Marcus shouted too. "Officer, something's burning in the SHU kitchen." Silence. No answer. Just the burning plastic smell getting heavier, sinking into the concrete like smoke. Then finally, footsteps. An officer walked down the tier, his voice calm, too calm. "Everyone relax. It's just the heater turning on for winter. Nothing to worry about." He kept walking. Never stopping. Never checking. But here's the thing. Marcus had been in the SHU for nearly a year. He knew what the regular heater smelled like. This wasn't heat. This was something burning, something melting. He rushed back to the vent and listened again. A third voice whispered, "No one's gonna notice, just keep scraping it out." Marcus felt his stomach twist. Scraping what? What were they trying to remove? What were they trying to hide? And why was that warning scratched onto his tray? He crouched on the floor, clutching his knees, letting the noise of frightened inmates echo around him. This was no mistake. This was no accident. Something was happening in the SHU kitchen, and the smell drifting through the ducts meant it was getting worse. And if the kitchen was contaminated, then tomorrow's breakfast would be too. Marcus stared at the vent. He whispered, "Please don't let them serve us that. Because in the SHU, you don't get choices. You get trays. And trays can kill you just as quietly as the isolation." Breakfast in the dark. Marcus didn't sleep at all. By 5 a.m., the whole tier was awake, banging on doors, coughing from the chemical smell, or whispering in the dark trying to figure out what the kitchen had done. At exactly 5:15, the lights flickered on. Bright, cold, unforgiving. The morning count began. Keys jingled. Boots stomped. Officers yelled, "Stand for count." Marcus stood. His head was pounding. His stomach twisted from hunger. But his mind kept returning to the same question. What did they cook last night? When count finished, silence fell over the tier again. Only one thing was left. Breakfast. Marcus's heartbeat jumped. He walked to the door and waited. Then he heard it, the sound every SHU inmate knows too well. The heated food cart rolling closer. Puff, puff, puff. Metal wheels shaking on the concrete. The officer in charge of trays reached the first cell. Clang. Food slot opened. Tray slid in. Clang. Slot closed. Second cell. Third cell. Every inmate reacted differently. Some shouted, "Don't eat it." Some laughed nervously, "If I die, I die." Some begged, "Check the tray, man, please just check it." The officer ignored them all. When the cart reached Marcus's cell, he took one step back out of habit. Clang. The slot opened. The officer slid in the tray without a word. For a moment, Marcus didn't move. He didn't even breathe. He waited for the officer to walk away before reaching down and pulling the tray closer. It was warm. Not hot, warm. Too warm, like it had barely been heated or maybe reheated twice. He lifted the cover. Instantly, his throat tightened. The food didn't look like oatmeal. It didn't look like cream of wheat. It didn't look like anything a human should eat. It was gray, not light gray, not watery gray, but thick, heavy cement gray. Like wet concrete. And it had small bubbles popping on the surface. Marcus stared. His hunger vanished. He picked up the plastic spoon and dipped it just a little. When he lifted it to his nose, he gagged. The smell was the same smell that came through the vents last night. Burnt plastic. Sour milk. Rubber. It made his eyes water. Marcus pushed the tray back. He couldn't eat this. Not today. Not after the warning. Not after the melted glove. Then he heard a sound that chilled him. From one cell over, an inmate, young, desperate, starving, began eating fast. Not slow. Not cautious. Fast. Scooping it in, swallowing hard, breathing through his mouth. Marcus slammed his fist on the door. Stop. Yo, stop eating it. But the kid didn't stop. He kept shoveling in more and more, mumbling. I can't go another day hungry. I can't. Then suddenly, cough, cough, cough. A wet choking sound. The kid dropped the tray. I can't breathe. More coughing. Something hit the floor. Then silence. Marcus pressed his face to the door seam. Hey, officer. Cell 123 is having a medical emergency. The officer walked past without looking. Marcus slammed his fist again. Another inmate yelled. He's choking, man. Still nothing. Still silence. Marcus stepped back from the door, feeling the helplessness sink deep inside him. That ugly SHU feeling where you know something bad is happening but you can't move, can't help, can't do anything. He looked down at his own tray. At the gray sludge. At the tiny rubber-like strands floating inside. This wasn't food. This wasn't a mistake. This was the SHU Kitchen's dark secret finally showing itself. And as the choking sounds next door slowly faded into quiet, Marcus realized something terrifying. Whatever the kitchen did last night was already inside someone, and he might be next. The cover-up. The tear went silent. Not the usual quiet because everyone is sleeping silence, but the heavy, tense kind, the kind that makes your ears ring. Marcus pressed his ear to the wall. The coughing had stopped. The thud had stopped. The kid next door, the teenager who had only been in the SHU for 3 weeks, wasn't making a sound. Not breathing. Not wheezing. Nothing. Marcus felt a chill crawl up his back. Then he heard footsteps, fast ones, coming down the tier. Clack, 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 clack. A sergeant and 2 officers stopped at the kid's cell. Someone jiggled the keys. A radio crackled. An officer whispered, harsh and panicked. Don't call medical yet, let's see what he's doing. Marcus's heart dropped. He leaned closer, listening through the tiny air slit in his door. Clang. The kid's cell door opened. One officer stepped in. Another followed. Then silence. Followed by a low voice. He's breathing, but barely. Another voice snapped. Get him up. Move him before the cameras cycle again. Marcus's stomach twisted. He understood what that meant. The SHU cameras didn't record nonstop. They clicked through angles every 12 seconds, leaving blind spots. Blind spot staff knew very well. The officers dragged the kid out of the cell. Marcus couldn't see it, but he could hear everything. The scraping of boots, the kid's body sliding on the floor, the officers whispering fast, trying to keep their voices low. One officer muttered, "This is why they told us not to rush the mixing last night." Another hissed, "Shut up. Just move him." Then they hauled the kid toward the hallway that led to the back of the SHU, the same hallway that led to the kitchen, storage rooms, and an area inmates nicknamed the Gray Zone, because nobody knew what happened there. As they dragged him, Marcus heard something fall from the kid's hand, a spoon. Just one tiny plastic spoon hitting the concrete. Then silence. Heavy silence. Marcus sat on his bunk, gripping his hair. They weren't treating this like an accident. They weren't treating it like a medical emergency. They were treating it like a problem, one they needed to hide. Minutes later, the sergeant walked back alone. He moved with purpose, calm now, like the chaos had already been buried. He stopped right in front of Marcus's cell. Marcus's chest tightened. The sergeant leaned close to the slot and said in a low voice, "Don't start anything. Eat your tray. Marcus didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't breathe. Then the sergeant added the words that made Marcus's blood go cold. Kitchen errors happen. But nobody makes it a big deal unless they want life to get harder in here. He tapped the door with his baton. Tap, 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 and walked away. Marcus sank onto the bunk. His mind replayed every sound. The choking. The dragging. The whispers about the kitchen. The warning on his tray, don't eat tonight. Something serious had happened in the SHU kitchen. And now the staff was trying to bury it. Even worse? Lunch was only a few hours away. And the same kitchen would be serving it. The noon tray. By late morning, the SHU felt different. Quieter. Heavier. Like the whole tier was holding its breath. Marcus hadn't touched his breakfast. Most inmates didn't. But nobody talked about it out loud anymore. Not after the sergeant made his rounds. Not after the kid's cell was scrubbed clean and locked again, empty, silent, replaced with nothing but the smell of bleach. Marcus sat on his bunk, counting the minutes. 12 p.m. was coming. But the kitchen would send trays again. Trays made from the same machines. Same pots. Same vents. Same hidden mistakes. He stared at the door, waiting for the cart. Puff, puff, puff. There was. Rolling down the tier like a metal coffin on wheels. Inmates pressed against their doors. Some cursed. Some panicked. Some prayed quietly. The officer pushing the cart didn't make eye contact with anyone. His eyes stayed straight ahead, stiff, robotic, like someone told him not to hear anything today. Marcus's pulse sped up. When the cart stopped at his cell, the officer didn't speak. He just opened the slot. Clang. A tray slid in. Clang. The slot slammed shut. Marcus didn't touch the tray. Not yet. He waited until the officer walked 3 cells down before pulling it closer. The metal felt colder than usual. He peeled the cover back. His stomach twisted. It was a nutriloaf, the infamous SHU loaf, made from blended leftovers. Brick-shaped. Dense like a chunk of cement. But today's loaf didn't look like any normal nutriloaf. This one had black streaks running across the top. Burn marks. Chemical-looking lines that didn't belong on food. Marcus sniffed it. The smell hit him instantly. That same odor from the vents. Burnt rubber. A hint of sour milk. And something else, a sharp, bitter smell that made the back of his throat tingle. He pushed the tray away. No way. Across the tier, an older inmate named Darnell yelled. If you smell that chemical, do not eat. I repeat, do not eat. Another voice shouted. They think we dumb, but we know when something ain't right. The officer rushed back down the tier, yelling. Quiet down. It's just overcooked loaf. Marcus shook his head. He'd eaten nutriloaf for months. He knew the texture. He knew the smell. This wasn't overcooked. Something was burnt into it. Inside it. Mixed in. Marcus picked up the loaf and looked closer. The black streaks weren't surface burns. They went deep into the loaf, like something in the dough had melted or burned during mixing. Then he saw it. A tiny, curled edge of something gray. Something thin. Something rubbery. Embedded just under the surface. He grabbed a plastic spoon and scraped at it until it lifted. A piece of rubber glove. Thin. His heart pounded. This was no accident. Not twice. Not the same day. Not after a midnight panic in the kitchen. Something was wrong in that room where SHU food was made. Maybe a machine had broken. Maybe a chemical spilled. Maybe someone didn't clean the mixer. But whatever it was, the staff was hiding it. And inmates were the ones eating it. Marcus dropped the loaf. His hand shook. He whispered, "They're feeding us poison." Bang. Bang. Someone 3 cells down started kicking their door, screaming. Help. My stomach. I'm gonna throw up. Then another inmate shouted. Somebody call medical. Chaos erupted. Men kicked doors. Men yelled for help. Radios crackled as officers rushed down the tier. Marcus grabbed his tray and pushed it back under the bunk, hiding it. He pressed his ear to the door and listened. 2 officers dragged another inmate out of his cell, one who did try eating the loaf. He could hear the inmate puking, coughing, begging. Please, Take me to medical. I can't breathe. The officers ignored him, dragged him down the hall, past the cameras, toward the same gray zone hallway the kid disappeared into. Marcus backed away from the door, shaking. This wasn't bad food. This wasn't spoiled ingredients. This wasn't an accident. This was a SHU Kitchen crisis. One they were covering up. One hurting inmates every hour. And Marcus had no idea how deep it went, or how many more meals inmates would be forced to eat from a broken, contaminated kitchen. But he was about to find out. Because the SHU Kitchen wasn't done yet. Not even close. What they hid in the cleaning closet. Marcus spent the next 2 hours pacing his cell. Every sound from the hallway made his heart jump. Boots stomping, radios clicking, doors opening. Breakfast had sickened one inmate. Lunch had taken down another. And the kid from earlier, nobody knew where he ended up. The tear was tense, buzzing with fear. But then something unusual happened. Around 2:40 p.m., the officers began closing off the SHU hall. Not for count. Not for showers. Not for a search. No, they closed it for maintenance. Marcus listened as heavy carts rolled past his door, carts that didn't sound like food carts. These were clunky, metallic, clattering, the kind that carried tools. Then he heard a voice he didn't recognize. Everything connected to the SHU Kitchen is in this wing, right? An officer replied. Yeah, mixer, vents, prep sinks, all of it. Another voice whispered. Then we need the closet open. Now. Marcus leaned closer. The cleaning closet. The one right behind the kitchen wall. The one inmates always suspected was used for more than mops and bleach. A key clicked. The closet door opened with a loud chunk. Then the voices got lower, tense, rushed, worried. Marcus pressed his ear to the crack of the door. What he heard made his entire body freeze. How much spilled into the mixer? Another voice replied. We don't know. The bag burst before anyone noticed. Then a third voice, one he recognized. The sergeant. Controlled. Don't say spill. Say leak. Spill makes it sound like someone messed up. Silence. Then the sound of something heavy being dragged. Metal scraping on cement. One man grunted. The chemicals still dried on the wall. Another snapped. Then scrape it off before the inspectors come. Marcus's heart pounded. They were talking about a chemical spill. Inside the SHU Kitchen. Not a tiny one. Not a harmless one. A spill big enough to reach the mixer. The same mixer that made the gray sludge breakfast. The same mixer that baked the burnt rubber nutriloaf. Marcus crouched down, holding the bunk frame to steady himself. The chemical spill could explain everything. The burnt rubber smell. The melted glove. The black streaks. The kids choking. The officers panicking. The cover-up. But this part was worse. They were trying to clean it quietly. Without help. Without medical. Without shutting down the kitchen. Then another officer whispered, How many trays went out before we caught it? The sergeant hesitated. 2 meals. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Breakfast. The 2 meals that made inmates sick. The sergeant continued. We'll bleach the closet, wipe the vents, and say the smell came from a broken heater. That's the story. Another voice asked. And the inmates who got sick? Silence. Then the sergeant replied. They'll be fine once medical clears them. Nobody needs to know what happened. Marcus clenched his fists. This wasn't just bad food. This wasn't the usual SHU neglect. This was a dangerous chemical leak. Something strong enough to burn through gloves, stain food black, and choke inmates. And instead of shutting down the kitchen, they were hiding it, trying to bleach it, trying to scrape it, trying to pretend nothing ever happened. Marcus pressed his head against the door. This was bigger than a bad tray. Bigger than a broken mixer. This was a cover-up happening in real time, and the people trapped in their cells were the ones paying the price. Then he heard movement again, fast footsteps coming closer. An officer shouted, Hurry! Someone's coming! Keys jangled. A door slammed. Footsteps scattered. Then silence. The maintenance crew rushed out, leaving only the echo of fear behind. Marcus sat on his bunk, breathing hard. Now he understood. The SHU kitchen wasn't an accident waiting to happen. The accident had already happened. And the people running it were doing everything they could to bury it. But the next meal was coming. Dinner. And if the spill wasn't fixed, that meal might be even worse. Dinner in the danger zone. By 4:30 p.m., the SHU sounded like a sinking ship. Men coughing. Doors rattling. Every voice tinted with fear. Nobody trusted the food anymore. Not after breakfast. Not after lunch. Not after the cleaning closet whispers Marcus overheard. But the worst part? Dinner was coming anyway. In the SHU, meals don't stop. Even if the kitchen is contaminated. Even if people get sick. Even if staff knows something is wrong. Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the door. He felt like a prisoner waiting for a storm he couldn't stop, couldn't escape, couldn't even warn people about. Then he heard it again. Puff, puff, puff. The dinner cart. Rolling closer. Slow, heavy. Dragging like a coffin full of bad news. Inmates started yelling before it even reached the tier. Don't feed us that. Stop the cart. We ain't eating chemicals. But their voices didn't matter. The officers never stopped. They never listened. They never even answered. The cart rolled right into Marcus's section. Keys jingled. Slots opened. Trays slammed in. One after another. Over and over. When the cart reached Marcus's cell, the officer did something unusual. He looked up. Right at Marcus. Their eyes met through the tiny crack in the door. The officer hesitated, only a half second, but it was enough to feel wrong. Then he slid the tray inside. Like he didn't want to touch it. Marcus waited until the officer left before crouching to pick it up. The tray felt hot. Not normal hot, unusually hot, as if it had just come out of an oven. He peeled the cover off. Steam poured out. Thick, cloudy, smelling like something burnt. He looked down. Chili. Pelican Bay SHU's version of chili, a mushy red-brown mix usually made from beans, leftover veggies, and whatever meat scraps they had. But this chili had problems. Big ones. First, the color was blotchy, some parts dark red, some parts almost black. Second, the consistency was wrong. It was too thick, too sticky, like glue mixed with food. The smell. That same chemical smell from the vents. Floating up from the tray. Marcus closed his eyes. No way. Not again. He picked up the spoon and slowly scooped a tiny sample, lifting it toward the light. And there it was. A thin, curled piece of plastic, melted into the chili like a twisted strand of burned ribbon. Then he noticed something else. Tiny white flakes. At first he thought it was salt. But SHU chili never had salt. He leaned closer. The flakes looked like dried paint. Or chemicals dried on a surface. His stomach flipped. This wasn't safe. This wasn't clean. This wasn't edible. Across the tier, a voice shouted, "Mine got black stuff in it." Another yelled, "This tastes like gasoline." Chaos erupted. Doors banged. Men kicked and screamed, "Stop this. We ain't eating this. Call a captain. Medical. We need medical." But the officers walked away fast, leaving the cart behind, as if they didn't want to be near the food either. Marcus stared at his tray. Something deep inside him whispered, "This kitchen is contaminated. This food is dangerous. And this is going to get worse." A loud crash echoed from the end of the tier, followed by rapid coughing. Then vomiting. Then another crash, someone falling to the floor. Marcus rushed to the door, pressing his face to the seam. He heard an inmate choke out, "My throat burns." A second inmate screamed, "Help him. He's foaming up." Officers ran back. For once, they sounded panicked. Not annoyed. Not angry. Panicked. One yelled, "Get medical now." Another shouted, "Grab gloves. Don't touch his mouth." Marcus stepped back. The officers weren't ignoring this one. They were scared. Scared for real. Because they knew what Marcus now knew. This wasn't food poisoning. This wasn't poor cooking. This was a chemical problem that was getting worse with every meal. And now inmates weren't just choking. They were reacting violently. Dangerously. Possibly fatally. Marcus dropped the spoon. He stared at the tray on the floor. At dinner. At the contaminated chili. And for the first time since arriving in Pelican Bay, he felt a new kind of fear. This kitchen wasn't just dirty. This kitchen wasn't just careless. This kitchen was broken, in a way that could kill. And the people running it were hiding the truth. Dinner proved it. But the night wasn't over. Not even close. The man who saw too much. Dinner was 3 hours away. Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the tiny crack under the door where shadows moved up and down the hallway like ghosts. Every sound felt twice as loud now. Every footstep felt suspicious. Every whisper felt like a warning. Then, out of nowhere, a voice spoke through the vent above him. So, careful. Almost afraid. Marcus, you awake? He instantly recognized it. Darnell, the old-school inmate with nearly 20 years in Pelican Bay. Marcus whispered back. Yeah. What's going on? There was a long pause. Then Darnell said, I saw something earlier. Something nobody was supposed to see. Marcus's heart jumped. Darnell wasn't the type to panic. He wasn't the type to exaggerate. He was the kind of inmate who'd survived the SHU because he learned to keep his head low and his mouth closed. So if he was talking now, it meant something serious. Marcus whispered, What did you see? Darnell took a breath. When they dragged that kid to the gray zone hallway, the one who ate breakfast. I saw the door open for a second. Marcus leaned closer, holding his breath. Inside that hallway was a rolling bin full of ruined kitchen stuff. Marcus frowned. Ruined how? Darnell answered. The bin was filled with black trays, melted gloves, and pieces of rubber stuck to metal. I'm talking about whole chunks of the mixer that got burned. Marcus felt sick. Darnell continued. And behind the bin, there were 3 big chemical bags. 2 sealed, 1 ripped open. Marcus closed his eyes. The ripped bag. The spill. The chemical leak. The one they tried to hide. Darnell wasn't finished. The label on the broken bag said it was a cleaner for industrial vents. Strong stuff. Stuff that needs masks and gloves. Stuff that ain't supposed to be anywhere near food. Marcus whispered, So that's what we smelled. Darnell replied, Not just smelled. That's what y'all ate. Every muscle in Marcus's body tightened. He felt anger rising, not wild anger, but the quiet kind that burns slow and deep. Darnell added, They dumped the contaminated food. Threw away the trays. Scrubbed the mixer. But they didn't clean the vents right. Marcus whispered, Meaning that chemical is still in the system. Marcus backed away from the vent. Darnell's voice followed him, steady and cold. Dinner's coming, Marcus. And that vent system runs right over the prep table. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Marcus sat down slowly. If the vents were contaminated, if they leaked during cooking, if dinner trays passed beneath them, then this wasn't just a one-day mistake. This was turning into a nightmare. A deadly one. Dinner is served. The SHU lights dimmed, the signal that evening meal prep had started. Marcus's pulse raced. He walked to the door and listened. At first he heard nothing. Then the familiar sound began. Food slots opening and closing down the tier. Men calling out. Men refusing trays. Men begging staff to stop the meal. The officer pushing the cart didn't care. He just kept moving. When he reached Marcus's cell, he slid the tray in. No words. No warnings. No eye contact. Just silence. Marcus waited until the officer walked away before kneeling and pulling the tray closer. He swallowed hard. Tonight's dinner was mashed potatoes, a piece of bread, and a scoop of vegetable mix. It looked normal. But Marcus didn't trust anything anymore. He lifted the potatoes. Steam rose, but the steam carried a harsh smell. That same sour milk, burnt plastic smell. Marcus stared at the tray. He took the plastic spoon and gently scraped the potatoes. Something caught the light. A tiny black speck. Then another. And another. He dug deeper. A thin smear of dark chemicals streaked the bottom of the tray, faint but visible. Marcus covered his mouth. This wasn't overcooked food. This was contamination. Darnell was right. The vents were still leaking. Marcus stood and shouted down the tier. "Check your trays. Everybody check your trays." Chaos erupted. "What is this? My food smells like gas. Why is it black under here?" An officer stormed down the tier. "Quiet down. Last warning." Marcus yelled. "Stop serving this. People are getting sick." The officer slammed Marcus's door with his palm. "The food is safe. Shut your mouth." But then, suddenly, 3 cells down, a man screamed. "I can't see. My eyes burn." Another yelled. "My throat. It's burning." A third inmate collapsed, banging into his own door. Marcus pressed his face to the door crack. Officers were scrambling. Radios were firing. Boots pounded the floor. One officer shouted, "Get medical. Now." Another yelled back, "No, take them to the gray zone first." Marcus's chest tightened. The gray zone again. Always the gray zone. The place where sick inmates disappeared. The place where contaminated trays were dumped. The place where the spill happened. This was no longer just a kitchen mistake. This was a disaster spiraling out of control. And SHU staff were scrambling to hide every piece of it, no matter who got hurt in the process. Marcus sat on the bunk, breathing fast. Dinner had confirmed it. The SHU kitchen wasn't fixed. The vents weren't fixed. The spill wasn't fixed. And now inmates were collapsing. One by one. And the night wasn't even over yet. Lockdown. 30 minutes after dinner, the entire SHU went quiet. Then an alarm sounded. What? 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 The emergency siren, loud, echoing, shaking the walls. Then a voice on the intercom. "All inmates, return to your bunks. This unit is now on lockdown." Marcus froze. Lockdowns in the SHU meant something serious. Fights, medical emergencies, or staff incidents. But this one felt different. The vents went off. The lights dimmed to half power. Footsteps thundered through the hallway, officers shouting, rolling carts, slamming doors. Marcus pressed his ear to the door. He heard one officer whisper urgently, "Shut down all ventilation. Don't let it spread." Another officer asked, "Is it airborne?" The sergeant snapped, "We don't know. Just shut everything down." Marcus's heart pounded. Airborne? Was the chemical in the vents still spreading? Was it drifting through the SHU even now? Was he breathing it? Suddenly, Marcus felt lightheaded. He sat down slowly. Was it fear? Or was something in the air? Down the tier, inmates rattled their doors. Some yelled for help. Some begged. Some coughed so hard they gagged. Then Marcus heard something worse. The sound of medical staff refusing to enter. A nurse shouted, "We're not going in there without respirators." The sergeant barked, "You're going in now." The nurse yelled back, "Not until you tell us what leaked." Marcus's blood ran cold. They didn't even tell medical. Nobody knew what they were all breathing in. Then a third voice, someone higher ranking, snapped, "Enough. We handle this in-house. No reports. Move them to holding, one at a time." Marcus leaned his head against the cold concrete. Holding cells. Gray zone. Vents turned off. Medical refusing entry. This was bigger than a mistake. Bigger than a spill. This was a full contamination, and the SHU kitchen had poisoned half the unit without anyone outside knowing. Marcus whispered to himself, "What are we supposed to do now?" Then, for the first time all day, he heard something unexpected. Boots. Stopping at his door. Turning slowly. His door unlocked. Marcus held his breath. The slot opened, and an officer's eyes stared directly into his. Cold. Focused. Serious. The officer said, "Pack up. You're moving." Marcus's stomach dropped. Moving where? To medical? To the gray zone? To isolation? The officer repeated, "Let's go." And Marcus realized, the SHU kitchen disaster wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The kitchen that never speaks. The dinner cart rolled away. The tier went quiet. And Marcus sat on the edge of his bunk, staring at the tiny piece of burned rubber he pulled from his meal. The proof the SHU kitchen would never admit existed. For hours, he listened. Boots walking fast. Doors opening and closing. Officers whispering in the hallway. Inmates coughing in the dark. Pelican Bay's SHU was supposed to be a place where nothing happened. But tonight, everything happened. A chemical leak in the kitchen. Sick inmates dragged out of their cells. Burnt black food. Warnings scratched into trays. The vents pushing out toxic smells. And a cover-up so quiet that nobody outside those concrete walls would ever know. Marcus leaned back against the cold cement and whispered, "If this is how they feed us, what else are they hiding?" The truth was simple. The SHU wasn't just a place where men were locked away. It was a machine. A machine where mistakes got buried. A machine where voices got ignored. A machine where the kitchen, a place meant for safety, had become a shadow no one wanted to look into. And even though dinner was over, and the doors were closed, and the officers pretended everything was normal, Marcus knew it wasn't. Because the smell was still in the air. The black streaks were still in the food. And the same broken mixer was still sitting in the SHU kitchen, ready to make breakfast for hundreds of men who had nowhere else to go. This wasn't the end of the story. This was only the first crack in a bigger truth. A truth hidden behind steel doors, concrete floors, and a kitchen no inmate ever sees. But the SHU has a way of revealing secrets. It doesn't matter how deep they're buried. It doesn't matter how hard the staff tries to hide them. Sooner or later, the truth leaks out. And when it does, Marcus and the rest of the SHU will be forced to face whatever dark secret the kitchen has been hiding all along. This was only the beginning.